This is Brad Keithley, Managing Director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Welcome to the weekly Top 3, the top 3 things on our mind here at Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets for the week of February 9th, 2026. The weekly Top 3 is a regular segment on The Michael Dukes Show. The show broadcasts on both Facebook Live and YouTube Live, as well as via streaming audio from the show's website, weekdays from 6 to 8 a.m. I join Michael weekly in the first hour of Tuesday's show from 6:10 to 7 a.m. for a discussion between the two of us about our 3 issues. We post the podcast of our discussion following the show on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Substack pages, also on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets website, as well as the project's page on national blog site, medium.com. You can find past episodes of the weekly Top 3 also at the same locations. Keep in mind that in addition to these podcasts, during the week, you can also follow and participate in the discussion with us of these and other issues affecting Alaska's fiscal and economic condition by following us on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets Facebook page and through our posts on Twitter. This week, our top 3 issues are these. First, we explain how the response of the House Finance Committee to the governor's proposed fiscal plan badly fails working-class Alaska families. Second, we explain how their reaction to the governor's proposed fiscal plan proves even progressives really don't care about working-class Alaska families. And third, we explain how the new data on non-resident workers acts as a report card on how the legislature is treating working-age Alaska families, giving the legislature a failing grade. Now, let's join Michael.
Well, we keep hoping that the adults in the room will be adulting, but it turns out that that seems to not be the case. We're going to jump into the weekly top 3. Number 1, how House Finance hath embarrassed themselves. Let's get into it.
Michael, the members of the House Finance, indeed, all the members of the legislature, I would wager, all the governor candidates have all run on at least one platform that's the same across the board. And that is Alaska needs a fiscal plan. Alaska needs to get its fiscal house in order, to get a solid foundation set on the fiscal side, and then we can start, working on other things once we have that solid foundation set. And I am sure that those representatives that when elected, when they caucused, put themselves forward for House Finance as the committee they want to be on the platform that they would work on a fiscal plan. They were committed to working on a fiscal plan to lay that foundation for the state and move it forward. Governor Dunleavy, it took him 7 years, but Governor Dunleavy finally proposes a fairly complete fiscal plan. Has holes in it, but the building blocks are there. In last Friday's column in the Landmine, I put those building blocks together and showed how you can get a balanced budget at a POMV 50/50 PFD through the next 10 years and beyond. He put the building blocks there to start working on a fiscal plan. And every legislator would have run on a platform of we need a fiscal plan. They would have run when they ran to be put on House Finance on, we need a fiscal plan and I'm willing to work on it. Dunleavy puts the plan out there. The Department of Revenue comes to talk about the plan. Dunleavy also, before that, has ICER do a new study, a 10-year update on the 2016 study, a very important study that we'll be talking about for probably the next decade until we do the next update. But ICER does a very detailed study that has a lot of good data in it that you need to dig into to understand. And I've been digging into it since the day that they published it, and I'm still finding new things as I go through it. ICER puts a plan out there. The governor finances ICER, doing the research and independent research to put together the components of a fiscal plan, not a full fiscal plan. ICER didn't do that, but to analyze the components that would go into a fiscal plan and enable you to sort of see what those components would do. They come to a hearing last week before the legislature, and I got to admit, I was just embarrassed for the members of the legislature. Now, the legislature is trying to spin this that they're embarrassed about how the administration performed in this hearing. But it was a put-up job. I mean, it was the legislature who was setting the tone. It was the legislature asking the questions. It was the legislature making the statements. And they were just looking for opportunities to pick at the administration. Oh, you didn't do this. Oh, you didn't do that. Oh, you didn't do this other thing. And it was just an embarrassing performance by the House Finance Committee members all the way around the circle, from the chairman down to the newest member on the Republican side. It was just an embarrassing performance all the way around. None of them started with or led with, okay, you've put some building blocks out there. We can start working with this to put together a fiscal plan, like I promised my constituents when I ran, and like I promised my fellow representatives when I ran for House Finance. We can see some building blocks. We need to get ICER in here. We need to understand that study better. We need to start seeing what the implications are of these various pieces. None of the legislators did that. To a person, as you go around the table, to a person, they nitpicked, they argued, they tried to undermine, they picked on the fact that the Department of Revenue hadn't researched to the nth degree every aspect of the plan. Notwithstanding the fact the usual tone in these hearings is, well, will you get back to me on that? Will you study that and get back to me on that? Not, have you studied it in advance of this hearing thinking that I may think it up? And if you didn't, oh, you're just a horrible person. Usually in these hearings, it's, will you get back to me on that? None of the tone of the legislature was like that. And it's just, I mean, it's embarrassing that we have a House Finance Committee, one of the major committees in the legislature, one of the two biggest major committees in the legislature with Senate Finance. We have a committee that was just satisfied with nitpicking and with just, trying to undermine the study because they hadn't studied every aspect of it to death on the date, before the date that they came out and rolled it out to the committee. And the other thing about this, Michael, is we have a whole ICER study that's just packed full of information, and in fact answers a ton of the questions that the House Finance Committee members asked. I will say that I'm a little disappointed that the Department of Revenue wasn't as familiar with the ICER study and could say, well, the ICER study says this, but we have a full ICER study that has a lot of data, tells you a lot of different things. And the legislature is now, according to the headlines yesterday in the Alaska Beacon by James Brooks, Alaska legislators say governor's fiscal plan is likely dead after first week of hearings. It's not first week, it's first day of hearings, is likely dead, without even scheduling up ICER to walk through a lot of the issues that the legislators raised. It's just, I mean, it's embarrassing. We have a House Finance Committee that really doesn't care and really isn't committed to getting a fiscal plan. They just want to score political points, right, political coup as they go by. So my takeaway from this is, to a member, including the Republican members that claim otherwise, to a member, they're just satisfied with letting the PFD go. They don't want to put together a fiscal plan that would actually save the PFD, even in a reduced form. They don't want to put together a fiscal plan that would actually allow the legislature to plan from year to year to year. They just want to continue to ride on the PFD until the end of it. They'll say they don't want to, but to a person, none of them picked up on the governor's offering, picked up on the building blocks that the governor put out there, picked up on the opportunity of the ICER to a person. None of them picked up on that and said, okay, let's start building a plan from here. Let's take what the governor's proposed. Let's take the building blocks that are in there and let's start putting together a plan. To a person, none of them did that. And what that leaves, the only way you balance the budget, if you're not going to have a fiscal plan that includes at least some alternative revenues and some spending caps and some other things the governor proposed, what that leaves is the PFD. And they seem to be content. And I'm talking to the Republican members who say they aren't. They seem to be content with just squeezing the PFD to the end. They'll be complaining about it. Oh my gosh, we need a fiscal plan,
right?
To preserve it. But they seem content to just squeeze it out until the end.
You know what? Well, and that again, that Commonwealth North thing that we went over yesterday with Kathy Giesel, where she's talking about all the things that the $685 million could have been spent on, backfilling Medicaid and SNAP and everything else. I mean, let alone all the other things. They're, again, they're saying the quiet part out loud. They're going to take the PFD, folks. That's what it's about. But what killed me was all the different comments, and there was 3 or 4 different comments, all basically paraphrasing them, smashing them all together, basically said, we just don't have time to do all this year. We just don't have time. I mean, we've only got 3.5 or 4 months, but we just don't have time to go through all this. And, where was this before? Why did he wait till the last minute? Not like we couldn't do it ourselves. Not like we couldn't pull it all together. Not like Ben Carpenter didn't try and do some of these things, over the last 2 years or anything else. But, it's too little too late. So we're only left with one thing, and that's taking the PFD, which we'll be sorry about, but we're going to do it anyway.
The thing about that is the governor offered 2 things. One, he offered the fiscal plan, and he funded the ICER study. And the ICER study answers a lot of questions. It may answer all the questions as you get into the nuts and bolts of it, but it answers a lot of questions, and it really short circuits a lot of the work that the legislature is complaining that they would have to do. I mean, so the legislature would say, well, what's the effect of doing a sales tax this way? Or what's the regional effect of doing it that way? The 2016 ICER study answers the regional impacts. What's the effect of mixing these two together? What's the effect of that? It's there. And it really, I mean, yes, it would take work. It would take hard work. But that's what you run for the finance committee to do. And you ran on to your constituents saying you want to have a fiscal plan. You're there to help develop a fiscal plan. Well, do the friggin' work to develop the fiscal plan. It's just, right. It's embarrassing to have a legislature that's charged with doing what's in the best interest of Alaska and just, entirely just, completely muffing the ball and being proud of the fact that somehow right. they muffed the ball.
Well, and I love how yesterday, again, Natasha von Imhoff from that Commonwealth thing was like, well, they got this ICER report, but why didn't they call Wood Mackenzie? Why didn't they call so-and-so? Why didn't they call, I encourage the legislature to pull their own study in and do more to study the study that studied the study before. And because apparently ICER is just not good enough, but that's already the direction that they're going.
It's delay, Michael. All of this is just delay tactics to excuse inaction on the part of the legislature, to excuse not doing the work on the part of the legislature. I mean, why didn't you have, somebody from Britain study something? Because that might have had some contributory effect. It's just, it's all one effort at delay after delay after delay after delay, knowing that what that does is lead you to the PFD cuts.
Yeah, well, this is just, it's leading us to destruction. That's what it is, because they just don't want to. Final word on this segment, Rob Myers gets it. He says, in 2020, we passed the budget in 2 weeks. In 2008, we completely overhauled the oil tax code in 2 months. It's not about time. It's about whether we want to. And that's 100% right there on it. This is so irritating to watch these guys just go at it and lay every excuse in the book in front of us. But again, everybody's saying, well, we just don't. If only he'd put this out last year or the year before or 7 years ago, we would have had time to go through it. And yeah, just this whole thing of, we just couldn't do that to Alaskans. We just couldn't do that to Alaskans. We couldn't hurt them financially by doing this. Instead, we're just going to take the PF. I mean, right? I mean, that's what it keeps coming back to. Oh, how is this going to hurt? How is this going to affect Alaska? Where was your concern when you started taking thousands of dollars from Alaskans in the form of a PFD cut? I mean, where was that?
And there's no recognition. I mean, Nellie Jimmy, I started laughing at as she went on. I mean, there's no recognition that a piece of this is a restoration of a significant share of the PFD back to POMV 50/50. So that's putting cash in their hands. No recognition of that. It's all, oh my God, you're taking cash out of Alaskans' hands. You're going to be taking cash out of rural Alaskans' hands through the sales tax, or you're going to be taking cash out of various groups. Name the group, AML. You're going to be taking cash out of our members if you do this. No recognition that it's a two-step process. The first step is to put big cash back in their hands, to take that cash out of being used as credits to protect non-residents and others from paying taxes, putting cash back in the hands of real Alaskans. And then yes, there is a tax, but that tax takes much less than what you've put back in their hands in terms of PFDs. And the net for 80% of Alaska families, when you go through the ICER study, when you go through the ITEP study before it, when you go through the 2016 ICER study, they all say the same thing. The net is that 80% of Alaskans end up better off by putting that money in their hands, even if you have to use taxes to raise additional monies. No recognition of that. None. It's just, I mean, it is horrible. There is no legislator on House Finance that I would, unfortunately, I've already given money to one of them, but there's no legislator on House Finance that I would donate to now. They're just all useless.
How about the resurrection of well, I'm just not going to tax somebody to give everybody else free money. Not that it was dead, but I mean, they brought it back up. Will Stapp is quoted, I'm just not going to take money from people and give it to other people. It was already
That's not what's going on. Again, look at the ICER study. Again, talk through that statement. Ask that statement of somebody who's done the study. And the answer is, what you're doing is you're taking money through the sales tax. You're taking money increasingly from non-residents to allow residents to keep money in their pockets. There's a 20% difference in the ICER study. There's a 20% difference between the amount taken out of Alaskans' pockets through PFD cuts and the amount taken out of Alaskan pockets by using a broad-based sales tax. 20% difference. Alaskans keep 20% more money in their pockets by taking it out through a sales tax as opposed to taking it out through PFD cuts. We're not robbing Peter to pay Paul. We are broadening the base so that non-residents, as occurs in every other state in one form or another, so that non-residents are contributing to the cost of Alaska government. And through a sales tax, we have a significant amount of contribution that comes from non-residents. When Alaskans go to another state, 40 seconds. When Alaskans go to another state, they contribute to the cost of government in that state, either through a sales tax or if they work in that state through an income tax. None. Alaskans get no benefit from non-residents coming up here. The governor's proposal did that. It broadened the base. And Stapp and others who ignore it they're anti-Alaska family. They want to protect non-residents, oil companies, and others at the expense of Alaska families.
Number 2 of the weekly top 3, where the legislature lets perfect become the enemy of good. Brad?
We've talked about it in the first segment. We talked about it over the break. We're going to continue talking about it here because it's just so infuriating and it's so counterintuitive to what's in the best interest of Alaska. So legislators, including those who purport to be concerned about middle and lower income Alaska families, who purported, like Elise Galvin, like Nellie Jimmy, like Neil Foster, and others who say, our primary concern is looking out for middle and lower income Alaska families. It's not. I mean, so what happened was we have the governor's proposal that's a sales tax, and admittedly, a sales tax is more regressive than an income tax, but it is certainly less regressive, hugely less regressive than PFD cuts, which is what we've had and what we'll continue to have if we don't have a substitute for it. They all, Neil, Nellie, Elise, all chimed in on the let's dump on sales tax proposal because it's bad, because it might increase costs in one way for Alaska families as a result of its slight regressivity. They didn't even ask what the regressivity was. The regressivity of the sales tax that Governor Dunleavy proposed is very slight because it's so broad and it picks up so many things that upper income families buy, and certainly non-residents buy. The regressivity line is fairly slight, certainly compared to certainly compared to PFD cuts and other ways that you could construct sales taxes or other tax approaches. But nonetheless, they let the enemy be the perfect, the perfect be the enemy of the good by saying, oh, well, it's not perfect. It's not a progressive income tax, to use Elise Galvin's words. It's not something else, to use Nellie Jimmy's words. They let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I don't think that they really care about that. There was a couple. Matt Buxton is a former reporter, now a blogger, proudly on the progressive side of things, writes from a progressive viewpoint, blogs from a progressive viewpoint. He has a blog. The title of the blog is the Alaska Memo, and it's a good read. I mean, Matt puts together words in a good way, and it's coherent. He had two blog posts, very close together, that just highlight how uncaring even the progressive side is about the impact of what's going on, the impact of the fiscal policy that we have currently on middle and lower income Alaska families. The first one is from February 2nd. It's titled "The Alaska Disconnect," and the subtitle is, ultimately, as the report outlines, and he's talking about the ICER report, the question of who pays is not just about Alaskans versus non-residents, but poor and middle-income Alaska, middle-class Alaska versus ultra-wealthy Alaska. And that blog mostly concentrates on the fact that we have this income divide, as we've talked about, income gap, as we've talked on the show before, between upper-income Alaska families and middle and lower-income Alaska families. This huge divide, but in the state, and talks about how tax policies affect those income groups differently. Basically goes down the ICER study and focuses on the fact that middle and lower income Alaska families are paying a lot more through PFD cuts, having a lot more adverse impact on their economic situation through PFD cuts than upper income Alaska families are, and that it's having a significant adverse impact on middle and lower income Alaska families. That is his blog on February 2nd. On February 6th, in response to the Dunleavy plan, he comes out with a blog that says this, headlined, "Legislators, local governments, and Alaskans pan Dunleavy's silly sales tax pitch." Dunleavy's, and the subheadline is, "Dunleavy's flimsy fiscal plan ran into one of the most thorough demolitions of a bill to take place over the course of a single legislative day." And it goes through and says how the sales tax is horrible, and the sales taxes, would pile up costs on middle and lower income Alaska families, that it's regressive, and that it would, hit families in the bush. Not a word in this blog, in this post, about the fact it would be a heck of a lot better than PFD cuts. It would put more money. You would end up with more money in the pockets, positive money in the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families, with the trade-off of replacing PFD cuts with sales taxes. Not a word about that in this blog. So you go in the span of 4 days, from a headline talking about the Alaska disconnect and how horrible it is that middle and lower income Alaska families are being hurt through PFD cuts, and about how the Alaska fiscal system is tilted against middle and lower income Alaska families. 4 days to a blog that talks about Dunleavy's silly sales tax pitch and flimsy fiscal plan, without mentioning the impact of restoring the PFD to a POMV 50/50. I don't think progressives, even progressives, care about middle and lower income Alaska families. I think what this is exposing is that progressives care more about government spend and more about them being able to direct what income flows into, or what benefits flow to middle and lower income Alaska families. I think this exposes that they care more about their control over it than they do actually about middle and lower income Alaska families having more economic staying power. I think what it's showing is they don't really care about the circumstances facing middle and lower income Alaska families. They only care about what the government is able to do. The government having enough money to, be a hero and come in and do all these things for middle and lower income Alaska families. And the easiest way to get money, because you don't want to talk about taxes, the easiest way to get money is to just keep the PFD up in the air and allow the legislature to continue siphoning from the PFD to fund the programs that they believe are important to middle and lower income Alaska families. The hypocrisy of what that hearing, the House Finance hearing, revealed about progressives, revealed about Republicans who claim they're all in favor of preserving PFDs. The hypocrisy that revealed about progressives, and the hypocrisy that revealed about their concerns and others' concerns for middle and lower income Alaska families, I think is huge. And the same thing on the Republican side. I mean, you have Republicans who ran on, we got to find ways to preserve the PFD. We got to find ways to make sure that money gets to Alaskans' pockets. Well, the governor proposed a way to do exactly that, to make sure that middle and lower income Alaska families are better off now than they have been for the last 7 years. Finally, the governor got around to proposing a way to do that. And a big part of that way is to restoring the PFD back up to POMV 50/50. And then you have Republicans run away from that. Republicans who ran on finding a way to preserve the PFD. You have Republicans running away from that. So I think the hearing was huge in terms of what it revealed about the motivations of both sides. Neither side really cares.
Well, I mean,
about middle and lower income Alaska.
No, Brad, the one thing that they care about, and I've been saying this for years, is that they control the spend, because in their heart of hearts, they know better than you how to spend your money. That's what it's about. As long as they control where the money goes, as long as they are in charge of it, then they're satisfied, and they will not give an inch or take under consideration any plan that would remove from them the ability to make those decisions. They want to control and plan the economy, right? They don't want the free market to work. They don't want it out of their control. That's what it's about. This is about control and knowing better than us how that money should be spent.
And it's both Democrats and Republicans, Michael. I mean, it's not just
absolutely.
It's not just Democrats. It's both Democrats and Republicans.
That's the Giesel thing the other day. It's $685 million that we're wasting on giving to the public. We could spend those things on so many great things like SNAP and Medicaid and housing and all these other things. This is truly what they believe.
Yep. And it's across the board. I mean, what we've done, and I've done analyses for several columns in the Alaska Landmine that shows this. What we've done is we have elected a bunch of upper income Alaskans. I mean, they can't avoid being upper income because the legislative pay has been increased to the level that it puts them in the upper income. Even if they don't have any outside income, they're upper income. We've elected a bunch of upper income Alaskans who are dependent on donors who are in the upper income, and we don't limit donations anymore, contributions anymore. So you have unlimited donations coming in from upper income families and non-residents and corporations coming into these legislators. We've elected an upper income looking out for legislature, and they just make excuses. I mean, just like the hearing attacking the governor over the sales tax, they just make excuses for why they don't do anything else, knowing that if they can pick at what anybody comes up with, that they will be able to maintain using the PFD, maintain using the source that has the lowest impact on upper income and non-residents and the corporations. You know, Elise Galvin, I can just go off on for days, but Elise Galvin says, "Oh, I've proposed a progressive income tax. I think that's the solution." If you look at Elise Galvin's progressive income tax, it's like this thin veneer on top of continued deep PFD cuts. It raises maybe 100. Keep in mind that the deficits are 1.6 billion. Elise Galvin's income tax raises 100 million or 150 million, maybe on a good day, even 200 million. A fraction of what the deficits are. How does she raise the remainder of the deficits? PFD cuts. So she goes around saying, "Oh, well, I've got this proposal that would be better for lower and middle." No, it wouldn't. Once you put the PFD cut portion with the thin veneer of a progressive income tax that she's proposed, it's still more regressive for middle and lower income Alaska families than a sales tax. Yes, she's got a piece of it that's a progressive income tax. Yes, she claims that she's proposed an income tax. But when you look at how much it raises compared to the deficit and compared to how much has to continue to be raised through PFD cuts, it itself is regressive, hugely regressive because of the PFD component with it. None of them are serious about looking out for Alaskans. None of them are serious about looking out for middle and lower income Alaska families. I mean, the ICER study says, look, I can get the share of what Alaskans are having to bear of the deficit down from 86% down to 68%. I can get it down almost 20 percentage points by moving from PFD cuts to a broad-based sales tax. That's huge. Being able to offload 20% of the deficit to non-residents is huge. None of them picked up on that. All of them just said, "Oh, well, it's just regressive," right? To Alaska families, without taking into account the impact on non-residents and how much would be raised from non-residents. They don't care. We've elected people who don't care about Alaska families.
They care about one thing. And that is being in control of that money and spending the money. That's what they care about. Because as you point out, I mean, I keep hearing about, well, what about this sales tax and what would it do to the bush? Well, what would it do to the bush if each person got an additional $2,000 a year, in the form of a 50-50 PFD? What if they got another couple 3,000, overall, or they got a $3,000 dividend? I mean, how much would that offset that as well? Yeah, it may look bad on the one side, but when you don't include the upkeep on the other side, that's where you got a minute here.
Well, the problem with the Bush is that they've survived. They put all of their local costs on sales taxes. So when you add in the state income tax, yes, you get high numbers. But if you look at just the state income tax component with the PFD restoration component, if you look at just that, it's positive for the Bush. Not only is it positive for urban Alaska, it's positive for the Bush. But none of the House finance members recognize that.
No, they don't want to take that at all. Frank just drops this on us. He said non-residents are already paying over 50% of our budget. Brad wants more big government because everyone else does it. And of course, his 50% is what he's talking about is the federal dollars that come into the state. That's what he's saying there. The federal dollars that come into the state is already non-resident. That's not, I mean, it's an apples to oranges comparison, and it's not what we're talking about. Every state receives federal funds. Maybe we receive more than others, but the bottom line is that's not non-resident money. That's tax. Those are federal tax dollars that are coming, which come from other people. Don't get me wrong, but it's not an apples to oranges comparison, Brad.
Oh, it's not. That's an example of, let's pick at something. Let's make up a fact that's entirely irrelevant to the current discussion. Let's make up a fact that's entirely irrelevant to the current discussion and say that undermines your point. It's not. It doesn't. What we're talking about is unrestricted general funds. What we're talking about is how you raise unrestricted general funds. And currently we're raising unrestricted general funds and almost entirely, at least the deficit portion, almost entirely on the back of Alaska families. Non-residents are contributing zero to covering the unrestricted general fund deficit that the state is running.
It's it's frustrating to watch, but Brad, I mean, what do you think at this point? Watching the behavior or watching what just happened in this finance committee meeting and everything else, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, is this thing just going to have to come off the rails before anybody is willing to actually look at the problem? Is that what's going to have to happen? Is the PFD going to be gone, and then we're going to be back the following year with a tax discussion, and it's not going to generate enough, and they're going to be fighting? And I mean, what is it going to take?
With this legislature, with these House Finance Committee members, including the newest one on the Republican side, with these House Finance Committee members, I think we are headed for absorbing the entire PFD. They say they don't want to, but they're not willing to do anything that prevents that from coming about. They're not willing to do anything that protects middle and lower income Alaska families from the burdens that they're imposing on them. With this legislature, with this reaction, with the statements that they've made, I mean, even Mike Kronk, who you would think is one of the most conservative people in the legislature. He's not. Mike Kronk sided with Kathy Giesel and Natasha von Imhoff and others who say, well, we just need to take the PFD. I mean, you can't have taxes while you still have a PFD. We're running deeper and deeper into deficits. You're absorbing more and more of the PFD. You're essentially giving up on the PFD. Even Mike Kronk, with legislators like that, frankly, middle and lower income Alaska families have no chance in the legislature.
This is what, just so that everybody knows, this is what Mike Kronk said. He said, I'm a logic person. We're going to tax those people that are productive so everyone gets a check. That doesn't work for me. That's just not logical to me. Making more of the same, making more of the same arguments, and quite honestly, the Senate's worse than the House. Again, you could just go back and listen to that Commonwealth thing and hear Kathy Giesel, just almost the anger and the disdain for the fact that they had to spend $685 million on a PFD. They're just angry about it. You could see Stedman sometimes. He gets worked up about it. You just, why do we have to spend this money? We could do so much better with that than you could.
Michael, it's not about the spend. I'm not saying they can't spend, they shouldn't spend, go spend to your heart's content. It's about how you raise the money to spend. And using PFD cuts, they're raising money only from Alaskans, taking money only from Alaskans, and they're raising it in a way that has the largest adverse impact on middle and lower income Alaska families. Spend all you want. Giesel, von Imhoff, Stedman, spend all you want. But it's how you're raising the money to fund that spend, and by doing PFD cut, Kronk, but by doing PFD cuts, you're taking it only from Alaskans, and you're taking it largely from middle and in a way that has the largest adverse impact on middle and lower income Alaska families. Sales tax, you get 42% of a sales tax from non-residents. You get 42%. That's not right. 32%. There we go. 32% of your revenue, nearly a third of your revenue from non-residents. Alaskans would pay nearly a third less, would be responsible for a third less of the money because you would raise nearly a third from non-residents. Raise it that way. Reduce the impact on the money you're taking from Alaska families. But no, they know they'd have to sell their programs then. They'd have to explain why we need revenues for their programs. Through PFDs, they just grab the money and go, even though it has this huge adverse impact on Alaska families.
Don't worry. Let them eat cake. That's why we have all those programs for those people That was the other thing. Oh, we need those monies for those forget about the middle class that doesn't benefit from either the welfare state or the corporate cronyism state. Forget
Exactly
about the
right.
middle class. The middle class is the one getting squeezed to death on this.
Exactly
sure.
right.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. We got more data. Brad's working on more data here. The real significance of the out-of-state worker data, which they just talked about, how fully a quarter or a third of out-of-state of work in the state is done by out-of-state workers. But Brad dove down into that data and got a little bit more on it. Brad?
There's a theme for this week's program, and it will come out in this one. The James Brooks, the article on the new study from the Department of Labor is in a James Brooks article in the Alaska Beacon from a couple of days ago, 4 days ago. The headline is "Almost 1 in 4 Alaska workers doesn't live in the state," new report concludes. And it goes on to talk about the growth that Alaska's had in non-resident workers, and they now take up nearly, more than a fifth, 22.9% of the workers in the state. A lot of people are saying, that shows how much of an influx we have for non-residents. I look at those numbers a little bit differently. What those numbers tell me is we have jobs. Alaska has jobs for a lot of people. Alaska has more jobs than we have people in the state to fill those jobs. And what that number really is telling me is we are not attracting workers to fill those jobs. We have 25% more jobs that could be filled by Alaskans that aren't, because we don't have the workers in Alaska to fill the jobs. So why aren't people coming to Alaska? Why aren't people coming to fill those jobs? If we have the jobs, and most corporations and most employers have preferences for Alaska workers, if we have the jobs, why aren't people coming to Alaska to fill those jobs? It's not because we have taxes. It's not because we have an income tax. We've driven people out. We don't. It's not because we have a sales tax, and that would unfairly affect some group of Alaskans. We don't. We're not pushing those people out through tax policy. So why are we pushing them out? And if you look at the income data, which I do, periodically, once a month, I try to dig into the income data and include it in a post. If you look at the income data, what we have is a situation in which Alaska income, both compared to nationally and compared to upper income families, is dropping. It is dropping in terms of real terms. There is some growth in nominal terms, that is, the numbers increase year after year. But after you factor in inflation, and you look at those numbers after inflation in real terms, real economic terms, the number is either staying steady or it's dropping slightly. Alaska is not producing the income that is needed to attract working Alaska families, working class Alaska families, middle and lower income Alaska families. We're not generating the income, and it's not because we're taking it out in taxes, either a sales tax or income tax. Alaska is not generating the income to attract those families. Where along in there did we start having serious problems? Not just problems, but serious problems. Oh, about the time we started cutting the PFD. About the time that the PFD would have started increasing, the returns from the permanent fund investments would have started increasing the PFD in a fairly substantial way, putting more money in the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families. We didn't tax them in the normal way through income tax or sales tax. We started taking money out of their pockets by cutting the PFD. And so what we have is we have jobs in Alaska. We have the potential to have more people in Alaska because we have the jobs for them if they would come up. But they're not coming. It's not because of tax policy that they're not coming. It's because we're not putting income in their pockets. The jobs aren't paying enough to attract them, and the state's program, or the state's approach of putting a portion of the commonly held wealth directly in the pockets of its citizens is increasingly being cut. We're cutting our own throat. And so when we talk about the share of non-resident income, or the non-resident workers that are coming into the state, and express all this concern about that, and express, some legislators say, oh, well, we need more childcare, or, oh, we need more this, or we need more of that, or we need more SNAP, or we need more we need more income in their pockets. We need to attract them by saying, you're going to earn more if you're up here. You're going to have a better economic life if you're up here than you do where you are elsewhere. We got a job for you. We got programs that share the commonly owned wealth with you, and you're going to have a better life, a better economic life when you're up here. But we don't do that. We do the reverse, and so it just sort of sickens me when some say, income tax will drive people out of the state. We're already driving people out of the state. We already have net out migration. We're already not attracting people to the state.
And you've talked about how the largest segment that's leaving right now are those working age, working class families. Those are the ones that are leaving. Again, that middle class is being squeezed out. That's where the net outflow is coming from.
Exactly right. We're growing in terms of upper income families. We're growing in terms of people in the top 20%. We are growing. They're growing both in terms of income, real income, and they're growing in terms of numbers. As the state population expands, they're growing in number as well. More and more are coming into the upper income brackets. Where we're losing people is in the middle and lower income brackets, and it's economics. It's just fundamental economics. So when people say, "Oh, we can't have an income tax," we'll drive them out of the state. We're already driving them out of the state. What we need is an economic program that leaves more money in their pockets, leaves more money, more of the commonly owned wealth in their pockets than we do currently.
Yeah, Brian says crime, failing schools, low wages, and no PFD, and a legislature that seems increasingly hostile to its citizenry. Why would you move here? That's essentially it. Why would you move here?
Yeah, well, we're finding out that people aren't moving here, and when you look at the income side, when you look at the net income, the real income that the middle and lower income Alaska families, working age Alaska families are encountering, the answer is obvious. They're not gaining any, where the national average is going up. They're not gaining any, and in fact, they're losing a little bit on a real income basis.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. 90 seconds, Brad, here. Can you leave us on a high note, or are we just, is this all just waiting for the train to actually hit the bridge?
It's not that we don't have alternatives. We do. Governor Dunleavy laid out some of them. He laid out building blocks that we could use to build a balanced, fair fiscal policy. He laid out building blocks that we could use to put together to get this state out of its deficits in a way that didn't adversely impact middle and lower income Alaska families. In fact, made their lives better. It's not that we don't have the building blocks to be able to do this. We do. The ICER study tells us we do, and how we can, and shows how, through their analysis shows how we could put them together. We have the building blocks. We don't have the people in place in the legislature willing to take the steps to put it together. And the report card on it is in the Department of Labor study that finds people leaving the state. Net outflow in working age Alaska families. That's the report card the legislature's getting. They're not attracting people to the state. In fact, they're pushing people out of the state. That needs to change.
I've been talking about this for 25 years. You and I have been talking about this going on 12 years. And it's just more of the same. It's just more of the same. We've changed out 60%, 65% of the legislature in the last, 6-7 years. And yet it's just more of the same.
We elect, is part of it, Michael, is we elect people who say one thing, who talk a good game when they're running, who talk about, being concerned about working class Alaska families, who talk about, maintaining the PFD, who talk about limiting the scope of government, limiting the increase in government costs, who talk a good game about that, but then don't follow through. And you can say, well, maybe it's the leadership once they get down to Juneau, maybe it's the Juneau bubble, maybe it's, the fact that they were lying to their constituents. Maybe it's the fact that they just don't know any better and they're just, being led along by the nose. It's probably a combination of all of those things. But that's what's happening. We're electing people who are talking a good game and then are running away from it when the rubber hits the road down in Juneau. And it's, I don't know how you fix that.
Well,
I don't know. When people lie to you, when people tell you one thing and then don't follow through on it, and you elect them because they're saying the right things, you donate to them because they're saying the right things, and then they don't follow through on it. I don't know how you fix that. You don't donate to them anymore, but
right. Well, Rob has been talking about this in his series, and again, he talks about the structures and the incentives that are baked into this system, and that's what needs to change. And he says right now, after changing out 75% of the legislature in the last decade of this problem, it looks highly unlikely we'll get different results by electing new people without structural change. We've got to change the incentivization, and the structure of that before we put new bodies in the chairs.
But those bodies that are already in the chair are the ones that vote on whether there's structural change.
That's true.
I mean,
it's a chicken and egg problem. I mean, it really is.
So we've elected people who say they will help bring about the structural change, and then they don't. Mike Cronk, if there was ever a guy who you would think would be sticking to, what's good for middle and lower income Alaska families, what's good for Alaska families overall, how to reduce the burden on them by shifting a significant portion of it to non-residents. If there was ever a guy you thought was going to do that, it would be Mike Cronk. He's just walked the exact opposite way. And it's just, I mean, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with people who won't follow through, who don't follow through on what they say they're going to do? How do you deal with people who, sign on for one thing when they're running and then walk away once they get down to Juneau? You vote them out, but you got to vote somebody in who will do it differently. And as Rob says, and as Michael, you say, we have replaced a bunch of these legislators, but we've just replaced them with people who do the same things once they get to Juneau.
Right. Well, at least you've got to have somebody who has the flexibility of when they hit the ground and realize that there's a major crisis, instead of poo-pooing the suggestions that are placed in front of them, then you should come up with an alternative instead of just poo-pooing it.
Or you should study the one that's in front of you. You should say, okay, thanks for the presentation. Let me think about this. We'll get back to you and we'll start working on this together. Instead of, the day after the hearing saying, well, that's dead. We're not doing that this session. Maybe we'll do it in future sessions. No, you won't. You're just happy to keep riding the PFD on down. That's what this has shown. Every member of House Finance has shown they're just happy to keep riding the PFD on down. It's just disgusting.
Yeah. Well, and you watch it and you see this going on over and over and over again. And at some point, I think this is why people just throw their hands up and go, they walk away. They walk away from, they're going to they're going to do what they're going to do. If I can live with it, I can. If I can't, I'm going to leave. Because that's where they're at, right? I mean, that's where they're at right now. They can't deal with this anymore. They can't deal with the fight. Because they're just exhausted by it. I feel that. Like I said, you and I have been fighting this for over a decade. I've been fighting it for 2.5. I mean, and at some point you just got to go, nobody's listening. Nobody gives a shit. It just doesn't matter anymore. So we're just going to pull the plug and walk away.
You fight and you think you've made progress. You think you've elected somebody, you've contributed to somebody, you've elected somebody who's going to make a difference. And then they don't.
Yeah.
And then they are part of a committee that just dumps on the administration when the administration tries to propose something. It wasn't perfect. I mean, there's a bunch of holes in it and things that needs to be done to make it workable. But at least it was an effort. Came 7 years too late, but at least it was an effort to start building, putting the building blocks together to solve this problem. They don't want to solve the problem. None of the House Finance Committee members, as you go around that table, none of them want to solve the problem. They're all perfectly happy to keep the problem, so they can talk about it. Ooh, it's a problem. You need to reelect me so I can solve that problem. But to keep it going without solving it.
Well, and I think it's an indication of what I just said when Kevin says we in this chat are all agree, but the majority of the comments for those of us who got elected are receiving from Alaskans are not the same that we see in here. Because again, They've discovered they can vote themselves largesse out of the Treasury, and they don't want to stop the gravy train. And everybody else, like us, has gotten so frustrated, we just walked away, threw our hands up and said, "F it, we're done." And they're not, because why? We had 4 hours of commentary here a few years ago about the PFD that was 4 hours, 99% positive, and in the end, they're like, "Well, you just don't understand." Right? I mean, you just don't understand. All right, Brad, I got to let you go. Thank you for coming on board. Take some blood pressure medication and a drink. That's all I can say. Thanks so much.
Michael, thanks for having me. Well, that's a wrap for another week's edition of the weekly top 3 from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you again for joining us. Remember that you can find past episodes on our YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Substack pages, and keep track of us during the week on Facebook and Twitter. This has been Brad Keithley, Managing Director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We look forward to you joining us again next week for another edition of the Weekly Top 3.